have some ethical, so.
Right. So, Mr. Hendrick, we've taken public comment on this, and we're gonna go ahead and work this on through.
The only thing,
Sorry. So, okay, Dr. Kessler.
So, again, these numbers from the supervisor of elections office are not partisan numbers, they're numbers. If you identify Republicans, if you identify Democrats, and if you identify the group NPA and other. And if you look at the turnout of voters, 2022, the Democratic turnout is 54%, Republican turnout 65%. That's a huge discrepancy. And we're about to change something without knowing what the repercussions of that are going to be. And we're going to, again, tempt this imbalance. It may get worse.
Ms. Hall.
Not to belabor this point, but that may be the case, but your base number is different. You're assuming that there's an equal number of Democrats and an equal number of Republicans when you make that statement, and that's not the case, as we heard. Leon County, I think, is a 2-to-1 Democratic registration, so the numbers themselves tilt toward Democratic, but I'm not sure how this is germane. I agree. I think you make a good point, but I think it's only half of the picture when we talk about voter turnout. You have to think about the numbers, not just the percentages, if that's where we're gonna focus, which I don't think that's what we should focus.
All right, any further discussion? If not, you ready to vote? Let's do this by show of hands and count, please. All in favor of the motion, please raise your hands now. Okay. All opposed?
Three, that's up to 10.
Okay. That's 10 to 3. All right, our next one is function number 4. This is the periodic charter review requirement. Let's take some public comment on this, and then we will, let's take public comment. Any public comment on this one? Anybody online? Okay, Mr. Cook, you want to give us some updates here?
Yes, here I wanted to point out, so for the material that we provided you, there was information on this issue 4 as it's described in the material, but you asked us to draft a recommendation and give you something to work with. And so in the material that was initially distributed to you, I know this week was a short turnaround, there might have been a couple of pieces, but in the material that's labeled page 8 of 17. So page 8 of 17, the first part of that just has some sample charter language. So what we did is we wrote something that we thought incorporated the broad topic, but left blank as to when the next charter review would be. That would be a specific date, and then a blank for the frequency with which future would be held. So we're gonna hold the next one in this year, and then every so many years thereafter. We also provided sample cycles going out, 3 or 4 or 5 subsequent charter reviews in each of those, and we gave you 8-year cycles. There was some discussion of that, that's what the county has. Gave you 10-year and 12. And the 10-year, if you remember from the original information, our peer cities, either 10-year or as needed were the most common, and there were a couple of outliers with shorter term. I think one with 8, one with even 6 years. And then the 12 was just an additional thought, keeping on a 4-year election cycle as opposed to the 10 that you wanted to, if that mattered to you. From a staff perspective, I think part of what I've heard is you think there needs to be some more review. My guess is that if you pass something for periodic charter reviews, the frequency might not be as, you may not need it as frequently if it's being done on a regular basis. In other words, if we're only gonna do it 2 times ever, let's do it now and 2 years from now, and then we'll be done. But if we're gonna do it on a regular basis, you get bites at the apple, if you will. So, that was, trying to clarify that, and then, make sure I didn't miss anything there. Oh, and again, the language that we provided identified those pieces, but it says, the member's duties and responsibilities of the committee shall be established by ordinance. And our thought there, and I don't think this was inconsistent with your discussion, but I bring it to your attention, that you would put in the charter language that says, here's how often this should happen, but not get bogged down in all the details of that, how that will happen. Because you don't know, as you discussed, what's going to happen 8 or 10 or 12 years from now. Maybe the committee needs to be 15 next time. Maybe, one's gonna take 10 months to do, and another one's gonna only take 6 months or 2 months, whatever. So that was the thought that went into it, and I just wanted to know kind of how we approach that. I think we captured the things you talked about, but obviously the decisions of when the next one is and how frequently to do it is up to you.
Yes, Ms. King.
When I was reviewing this, and I looked at the minutes from the last charter review, there was a specific recommendation to convene a charter review commission in 2013, and I think that was a specific recommendation, for charter change. Can you give us some background on, did that not pass? Did it not make it to the ballot? Did it make it to the ballot and they just decided they didn't need one?
It did not make it to the ballot, and I think it was an item that was recommended, it just wasn't passed and brought forward to the ballot, so that there was not created.
Meaning the commission did not act on the recommendation of the committee.
Correct.
Yeah. Any other questions from Mr. Cook?
I do want to comment that people may remember the charter amendment in the 2014 election, which was not done through the charter review process, but through a citizen initiative, which created the independent ethics board.
So before we get going on this, I thought that at the last meeting, for those of you, because a couple of you weren't here, we sort of were getting close to a consensus on this. I think Ms. James had a suggestion, if I remember this correctly, that we maybe have the initial look at 6 years, and then an interval of 8 after that. And the one condition I thought we said was that we wanted the committee to convene by June 1 of the year prior, so there was enough time to actually look at it. So if maybe we want to start the discussion with that, or just maybe want to, weigh in one way or the other, or something in terms of a framework. And let me know if I mischaracterized that.
Honestly, I don't know.
Okay,
If that was a motion, I said.
I don't recall.
That sounded accurate. We were kind of going back and forth over what the year's structure should look like, but we all were in agreement up to that point. But it was nothing that was a major difference between any of us, I don't think. So, however you want to proceed, if you want to hear a little bit about
If
this.
somebody would like to make a motion to that effect, we can, start that on the motion. Okay, Dr. Kessler, is there a second?
What is?
So I think the motion is that we recommend that there be an initial review of the charter in 6 years, and then that there be subsequent reviews every 8 years after that, and that the committee convene no later than June 1 of the year prior to the proposed ballot consideration. Okay.
I'll second the motion so we can discuss.
Okay.
I just want to clarify that saying that the initial meeting would be no later than June 1st, that doesn't mean that the city commission doesn't start the planning process before that, or staff starts the planning process, so that everything is ready to really kick off on June 1st.
Then for clarification, that would be June of 2030 based on the same language, is that correct?
Right now.
June 29th through the 30th election.
If you look at page 9,
So
it's
the
the
6
first
years
thing.
is not on 6 years from today, it's on the election
The
cycle.
election, so it would be like on the
22 years.
So charter committee will be convened June of 2029 and every 8 years.
But that's under 10 years cycle.
So
So we,
No,
you can, we just gave you samples, you can tell us whatever you want.
So, just to clarify, motion on the table is to, accept that first one, June 2029, March 2030, but then have that on an 8-year rotation.
so it's actually that first line.
First line, okay.
Any other discussion on that? Are you ready to vote on this one?
Just move comment. And I'm fine whichever the committee, whichever direction you guys want to go with, but I would suggest to, potentially look into one down, 2031, panel meets in the presidential year and only seats 1 and 2 are up for re-election. I feel like those years are a little bit less crowded on the ballot. I don't know if that's true or not. That may allow voters to hear more about the ballot initiatives or charter review process. The years that we're discussing, 3 commissioners and the mayor's race, the others, I don't know, I'm fine with either way, but I'm just looking at it from a crowded example.
Well, am I correct that the way it's proposed would not be on the same years as the county charter, right? Which is one of the goals, of 2024.
Both of those would be, both of them.
So that's beyond,
Correct. Convening in June of 29 for recommendations in March of 24 would not be overlapping with the county. I think the comment made the next line down, if you were on, that was June of 2031 for the election of March of 2032, that also would not overlap with the county. So I don't think the county comes into play in the things you discussed thus far.
Okay, as well.
I just, I like everything we're talking about. One thing I wanna add, and I think I've gone on the record saying I don't wanna be overly restrictive, but I think it'd be helpful to specify a minimum convening time, so no less than 90 days. And the reason I think that is, if there's not a whole lot on there, then maybe they could meet every other week, and not every week. I think that it would be helpful to at least set that boundary of, we don't wanna, because it's conceivable you have a commission that says, well, we don't really wanna see anything done, so you got 10 days, and then, in the spirit of setting guardrails, but not getting too specific, that's a piece that I think might make some sense. I don't know what y'all think about that.
No, couple things. One, I prefer less prescriptive. I think the language where we're stating when the charter review committee convenes is what gives, I think, a reasonable committee its parameters. So you either stretch it out or you compact it and get it done, but I don't think we should be that prescriptive to future committees. And then the other thing, to Brewer's point, my biggest concern of all of this is making sure that we have a thorough review sooner rather than later. So pushing it down to June of 2031 just seems much too far.
Any further discussion on this one? If not, we vote. All in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, all opposed? All right, very good. With that, we will move to function 1, which is the number of electors. And we'll take public comment again, just to clarify what we're doing here. This is just on the question of, do we add commissioners to the 5? The issue of single-member districts, which some have brought up, and I think some on the committee may want to suggest to the city commission that should be considered as a separate matter. We're gonna consider maybe later this evening. So this is just on, is it 5 or is it more than 5? So, okay, public comment. Anybody would like to speak on this item? Mrs. McDonough.
I would like to speak very forcefully that the number remain 5. The public just got a big hit with a tax property tax increase, that it is still absorbing and moving to more than 5 commissioners by the time, and increasing salaries if that happens to the same amount as the county, could create about $1 million price tag increase in the operating budget for the city. When you add the retirement and all of the other benefits and what it takes to run their offices, and with the salaries of the aides right now, and the number of aides that have increased since my day, it could be a lot higher than $1 million if you add 2 more people and you add all of what it takes to support. Right now, I did not realize until I was looking at the information how big the mayor's office has become. I know it was a long time ago, but I had half of an aide when I was there. When I was mayor was the first time I had a full-time aide and somebody to answer the phones. And looking at all of the bennies that have added up for commissioners over the years, and how big the mayor's office has become, even though the mayor does no more than I did when I was mayor, and is still not a strong mayor. And it is still a part-time position, because the mayor has a full-time job someplace else, like all of the county commissioners, like all of most of the city commissioners, and nothing stops them from doing it. And I could not support moving to more than 5 commissioners, including the mayor, and because the burden on the public financially would be too high. And if it isn't broke, doesn't need fixing.
Thank you. Mr. Manager.
A little different issue that I saw, some of y'all and maybe some of the comments is that it was hoped, so brackets, maybe more commissioners would break the current deadlock, and everyone knows the 3-2 deadlock we were talking about in the city things. You could just as easily, though, end up with a 4-3 deadlock. I think what the real issue is, and also, by the way, the last election, every one of the incumbents was challenged, and every one of the incumbents won. And clearly, the incumbents were of opposite on various issues out there. So if the public is really of a mind to want to make fundamental changes in what goes on at City Hall, they need to be voting a certain direction. And clearly, they were just voting for, that they thought the people who were there were still the ones they wanted to see there. And so kind of like what we see sometimes on national government or state governments. You really want to change something, you need to change who's in the seats, not necessarily change the structure. And so that's why we're recommending leave it at 5 and other reasons.
Thank you. Are there other comments from the public? Ms. Snyder, Mr. Sims?
I'm Stanley Sims at 1320 Avondale. compensation. When I look at a public servant, I think that what it is in the name. But the Bible says that a servant is worthy of his hire. Worthy of his hire. I put a commissioner, and God forgive me for this, pretty much I put it like a pastor. The compensation package. Well, the people decide what their compensation package is based upon how he served them. I look at an 8.5% tax increase that does not include firemen. My son's a damn fireman. I look at the discord in city commission meetings that just not limited to me, but are limited to the media, limited to other elected officials where they're, well, I can't say distillery. And then we don't persecute them. But when someone reacts because of a tree, we full-fledged. Compensation? Where I'm going with compensation is this. Our elected officials have not demonstrated, nor have they provided us with total accurate information. Hell, I had to write the attorney to get some of the information that you guys got. And then my good friend, Mr. Bruce, was saying, wait, is Mr. Sims on this medication about these 250 accounts and this $500,000 for the mayor? And we still ain't really got that in there. And then Mr. Cook, my good friend, and I hope you don't come after me, when I ask about it, he give us fluff answers but no documentation. Well, I sent an email because I couldn't even talk to my doggone wife. A servant is worthy of his hire. And Mr. Mushkin, when we look at our city leaders, and Miss Beth Crum, I don't know what you like, but I feel so disrespected right now. I just couldn't let that slide. But we need some respect. I'm through, Miss Crum. Beth got a lot of good stuff to do.
Any other, members of the public want to speak on this item? Again, this is the number of commissioners. Yes, ma'am.
I guess I have a
Give us
few.
your name, please, if you would.
Oh, sure. Serenity Williams, I live here in Tallahassee. A few questions, well, I don't know if you can answer questions at this moment, but if, during our last budget cycle, and we were talking about how we don't have enough money to cover, these sidewalk projects, and we're having to cut back from this and that and the third. Where are we finding money to add add positions? I just did a quick look through. These aides don't get paid anything, honestly. And, if we want to increase, productivity or the effectiveness of the city commission, maybe it could be looked at what we already have, but I don't understand where the money is gonna come from to add these positions. Maybe that could be explained. But I guess right now, I would urge you all to say no for that reason. But yes, I'll end my comment there.
Thank you. Any other, comments from the public on this, anybody online want to speak on this item? Okay. Members of the committee, any discussion, yes, the number of commissioners.
I'd just like to make a motion, to keep the, size of the city commission as it is.
A motion and a second, discussion on that? discussion? Mr. Willis?
So, can I just ask a procedural question? If we, let's say this goes on the ballot in '24, say hypothetically we had 12 new seats. Those elections wouldn't take place till 2026?
Correct.
Can I make a comment? Sure. So I think there's been a lot of conversation around the budget. I maintain that when it comes to representation, that's the highest and best use of government. Is it representing, is it taking care of the citizens that it's charged with? And so the conversation about budget for me isn't as important because as you look at the time cycle, you're 2 budgets away from that being a factor. So there's time to figure out where can we move some things around, where can we find savings. But again, I go back to on this issue, and to be honest, I'm not ready to vote on it because I don't think as a committee we've come to terms with the question of representation and whether 2 more, 3 more, 4 more changes or has any effect or leaving it the same provides adequate representation. So I mean, I think there's members of the public that might think that I have a number in mind, and I really don't. I'm more thinking about this as, have we, as a committee, kind of gone through the exercise without the outside rhetoric, without the noise of Dems, Republicans, and talked about is what we have providing the representation the Tallahassee needs. And so I'm just gonna say again, I don't know that I'm ready to vote on this issue. And I think at the last meeting, I felt like there was some conversation around salary that we could have that I thought might head in a more productive way, because I think we're probably a little bit closer on that. I think we fleshed it out a little bit better. I think there's some proposals that we were toying around with, and so that's where I'm at. I don't know what the committee thinks. We have a motion on the table. I'm inclined to vote down on it. I would kind of be inclined to vote down if we had a motion for 2 more seats. I'm not ready to make that decision at this point. And so that's where I'm at.
Other discussion? Are we ready to vote? Dr. Kessler?
I just want to make some comments. I take issue with some of the statements that were just made. One statement was that the budget wasn't very important to the person making that statement. And again, I said at the prior meeting that the budget is very important to many of our citizens who are paying taxes, who are putting food on the table, who are taking care of persons that are ill, whatever their needs are. Those increases that will happen impact those citizens. And the time to find savings is not some elections away. The time to find savings in the city's budget was well before that tax increase.
Amen.
And then to refer as outside noise or rhetoric for us to disregard, that is the public. Who would see that.
Amen.
Thank you.
And all of those issues, again, go back to, this is a system that has been working. There's no demonstration that it's malfunctioning because of its 5 members and increasing to anything other than what we presently have. There's no good argument for it.
Right, Mr. Wells?
So I'm just gonna clarify, what I meant by outside noise was the partisan conversation from the two most irrelevant partisan organizations in the state, the Leon Dems and the Leon Republicans. Not important to me, not relevant. Very petty. And when I talk about the budget's important, but I think it's important to also note that as we're looking at what the state's doing, there are measures moving through that might change the way homestead taxes go onto our city budget. There are multiple projects throughout the city that will add property value to our property tax rolls. And so when you look at the next 2 years, the budget is going to be very different. It could be higher, it could be lower. There could be places we have to make cuts. We don't know that. But what we do know is what we've been charged with is deciding whether the current situation, with the personalities aside, with the partisanship taken out of it, looking into the future, 10, 20, 30, 40 years, is it working? And I don't think as a committee we've answered that question, so.
But you'll have more review committee meetings in the next year.
Mr. Martin, work with us here, there's been public comment, I'll call on you, but let's kind of keep the, comments from the crowd, at the public comment level. Ms. Corbin.
Somebody just clarify for me, and I don't think this has to do with the motion on the table, but it does. What is the total city budget? Total budget?
Right at $1 billion. I think that to get to $1 billion, you have to include the current year capital, but it's not far under $1 billion.
Okay, thank you.
That includes general government, as well as utilities and everything else, airport, everything else we do.
Any other discussion? We have a motion on the table.
I have a question, this maybe for Mr. Payne. Did you do a calculation on the,
For
for this particular?
for this particular issue of the public comments that we've had through the survey that was online, it's about 50-50.
Any other discussion? You ready to vote on this? Mr. Finley?
Yeah, I just want to make a point that we're not really deciding anything here. We are an advisory board. From what's going on, it goes to the commission. Commission has to discuss, and there's more room for public comment. But ultimately, the deciding factor of any of these things that we discuss is the voters. We are not making any decisions here. We're just advising the commission, who is then going to advise the voters. Then, if we do have a group out there who are going to make their case for any of these topics, there are 2 more opportunities to make their case. So I think we are taking this a little bit too literal, and the emotions are getting a little bit higher on this. But it's an advisory committee, and our recommendations will go to the commission, and they may not take any of these, which is the point that Mr. Chairman made in the first meeting, that anything we discuss or the votes we take may not even make it to the ballot. So with that being said, I'm going to, I'll motion to postpone this topic till the next, substitute motion? Can I have a substitute motion? No, we haven't. Okay, well, so,
So if you disagree.
I believe you could do a substitute motion.
yeah,
Okay.
So,
So there's a proposal for a substitute motion to defer this item.
table this item until the next meeting, so that, we can get a little bit more public input and vote on this and get to the next topic. Where we could discuss the compensation and potentially work on that topic a little bit more and make a recommendation.
Okay, is there a second for the substitute motion?
Second.
Okay, second, discussion?
My only concern is that this is the last meeting where all 10 of us are going to be.
Exactly.
That's
what he's trying to do.
I also want to make one more comment. Mr. General is very correct that we have no real power here. We are just advising the city commission. But he's not correct in saying that the city commission will be advising the public.
Right.
The city commission will be deciding what the public sees on the ballot. So if they decide not to put it on the ballot, the public has no voice.
I'll say, we're here, we agreed to come in and vote where we could. I'm empathetic to the understanding that we could kind of postpone this again, but I'm not sure what would change in another week. We've heard the public, we understand where we disagree. I say let's have a vote and see where it falls.
Amen. Other discussion on the substitute motion? No. Okay, we ready to vote on the substitute motion? Okay, all in favor of the substitute motion to table this temporarily, please raise your hand. Okay, all opposed? Okay. All right, so the substitute motion fails, so we're back on the original motion, which is to recommend leaving the number of commissioners at 5. Any further discussion on that motion? No, sir. Okay, if not, all in favor of that motion, raise your hand, please. Okay, can you,
Yeah, that's all.
okay.
Yeah, if you want to show us unanimous, I'll vote yes. No, I'm not close.
That's up
Yeah.
to you on that.
This is really nice.
What was the final vote?
Yeah, I don't think so. I need to vote for it. So can I change my vote?
Everyone wants to change their vote now, huh?
I can't change my vote?
You know, we already took the vote, so, I guess we could do a motion to reconsider. And,
All I'm trying to do is show we have to be able to reconsider, and then a second, and then a new vote on whether or not you'll reconsider, and then
I withdraw.
Then you have to do a motion again.
All right, so it doesn't sound like there's a motion to reconsider, is that correct? Okay. All right, so we've made it through functions 3, 4, and 1, now we're to function 2. Those of you who weren't here last meeting, there was a suggestion made that please guys, we're trying to make sure we're heard here. So there was a suggestion made at the last meeting that maybe we have an initial vote about do we want to recommend an increase in compensation or not? If we don't, then there's, no need to go any further. If we do, then we can launch into the different ways that can be done. So if that makes sense to the committee, we can launch down that path, or if others would rather not do that, that's okay too. But that was, I thought maybe a good way to do this to allow time for other things. Or to spend the appropriate time on making people work. So if that's what the committee would like to do, it's open for a motion to that effect. Or if not, we can launch into a whole discussion of this. Let's hear from the public before we do that. So, anybody from the public like to speak on this? Is the function of, should the commission's compensation be changed?
1320 Avondale Way. Mortgage still the same. The taxes keep going up every day. And it's taxation without representation. Because, Mark, I'm not trying to do your last name again. My man's wearing it. Initially, when I came to this board, I didn't have a problem with increasing the salary of commissioners. And Commissioner Kessler, over these last week and a half, people been wearing my ears out. And the way I tried to approach this, I wanted to look at, I learned in total quality management that when you want to improve something, you don't look at the person, you look at the process. And so I tried to approach this from a prospect point of view. And I guess to eloquate and help with me with time, I'm gonna have to call some names. I look at an individual like Commissioner Porter, high ethical, could use her position to land her another position so that she could probably make her ends meet and won't have to scoot around town. But she knew what she signed up for. And she knows that she has to safeguard who she's with in order to maintain character and integrity. Well, everyone on that board don't have that. And so it's just, it's challenging for me to stand up here and to give you my honest educational answer. Ms. Beth, thank you. And if I hurt your feelings, I'm sorry. I'm just direct, old country boy. But I don't hold hard feelings. But it's hard for me to share with you. I just told Ms. Gary I wanted to ask her a question because I don't like coming up here and looking stupid. Mr. Bureau just checked me and just said, I'm not getting rid of your primary. I'm just saying when it's only 2 people, we move it. But going back to what I'm saying, man, is this. $49,000. But there's other accounts. They fly off to Washington, D.C. We're in this book that I can look in this book and say, oh, okay, if they're going to Washington, D.C., they got that money out of this account, and they have 20 grand that they can do for others. It's not broken down like, even though I know they go. So we don't have a full, accurate picture, and the mayor's allocation is double that. And ain't nobody told me I'm lying yet. Mr. Brewston asked. And I'm just saying, we're giving choice information, but asked to give an opinion on full-fledged things, and that's unfair to us.
Yes. I am not gonna take a position on whether the compensation for city commissioners should be increased or not. I'm a candidate for one of those positions, and I don't want to be in a position of having a conflict of interest. However, I will reiterate one of the comments I made at a past meeting, that there should be something in the charter that lays out how increases are done. The way it's done right now, that formula is 1/2 of county commissioners' salaries. That was a formula. That wasn't in the original charter. That's a formula that was put in during my tenure because city commissioners' salaries were so paltry that it had become an embarrassment at $7,000 a year. And so, I am suggesting that you might want to look at a formula that goes in the charter, that goes before the public, and the public acts on whether or not they support that formula. If it is your intent to have fair compensation for city commissioners. That's my comment.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Javeron, 521 East 7th Ave. I understand the fact that the city commissioner is an intensive job, but at the same time, it's also a policy job. They aren't doing executive work, they're not doing work of administrating the city. That's what the city manager and their staff's there for. So I think that has to be kept in mind when we're talking about the salary on it. And also looking at other cities and how other cities are taking their salaries. I'm from Jacksonville, if the sweater doesn't give it away, where the lowest salary for a city council member is $49,000. Only 1,000 more than out here for a city that's a lot larger than Tallahassee is. So I think we need to keep scale in line with that. And I think that even if there is some proposal to increase or some formula that would cause an increase to happen, there needs to be mechanisms in there for city commissioners to voluntarily forego the pay rise. That's what we have in Jacksonville. And each year, city council members have to go and file a form saying, I'll take the pay increase, or I'm gonna decline the pay increase. It's a way to be transparent with the public about salaries and about how the salaries are increasing or decreasing. And I think it'd be a good way to make sure that voters understand why and how salaries get to where they are in the city. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Crowley.
Yes, I just would like to echo what some of the other folks have said, but I think it's important enough to say it again. I've heard some things about how this is supposed to be, you know, citizen legislator type concept where you're not really a full-time commissioner. Well, I don't think that's a very good idea. This is a complex city. There's a lot going on. I think it should be a full-time job. Now we can get into whether we have to force people to quit their other job in order to do that. But I do think that if we want real quality commissioners, we gotta give a real salary to people. Make it a living wage for people to do that work, because it's important work. But I also agree, what commissioner is gonna vote to give themselves an increase? That doesn't necessarily look good to the public, so it puts people in a difficult position. Do we wanna have a society that's just ruled by people who can afford to do this in their spare time because they're independently wealthy? No, I don't think that we do. So I would like to see an increase for city commissioners, and I would like to also see a mechanism by which they are automatically increased over time to address inflation. Thank you.
There's Mr. Martin.
Yes, I do like to see good people, but in my mind, good people don't become city commissioners. It's public service that motivates them to do this. By the way, these races are nonpartisan, Mr. Demo. You keep saying bipartisan. It's nonpartisan. Last week, you mentioned, I don't know if it's current county commissioner or not, but you talked about a county commissioner who had given up her job, her full job, in order to be commissioner. Well, you couldn't be talking about the only current female county commissioner because her law practice is still in operation, sir. She still goes to that office. So I don't know which commissioner you're talking about. Perhaps it's someone from the past. I suggest that you're talking about a current one to get your facts straight, sir. Talking about you, you got $1 million payoff from Blueprint. The same people who you're determining their salary for, they're part of the Blueprint board. And once somebody's been given a favor by somebody, they tend to want to return the favor. I think you should recuse yourself from this particular function, sir, after having gotten what you did. And we know that from 2 weeks ago, the city commissioner apparently who has brought this forward is the same one who appointed you. I certainly hope you feel that your commitment to the public exceeds that to the person who appointed you. But I would strongly recommend you seriously consider recusing yourself. And public service that I've been promoting, listening to you last week, I get the impression from you that the only thing that motivates somebody is money. You kept talking about they'll do a better job if they get paid more. We need people who will do a better job, not based on how much they're paid, sir. Thank you.
I have a question.
Yes, yes.
Is this issue about making the positions full-time?
Not specifically, no. It's just about the compensation.
Okay, then I don't need to comment again.
Other members of the public like to speak on this topic? Anybody online like to speak on this topic? No one wants. Okay, committee members, so again, back to what I said before, do you want to try and vote this up and down on raising or not, or would you rather discuss and whatever, however you would like to do it, the final committee?
So I,
Did you want me to?
All right, feel free, go ahead.
I apologize, that was one other area where there's a lot of information provided. Again, let me know if you didn't provide what you asked for, but I think for me, one of my takeaways in preparing it was just that there are a lot of ways to look at it. There's a question about commissioners' compensation, which is the topic on board. There's discussion of
overall budgets available, so we provided some information there. That information is simply pulled off of the city's website, so it doesn't have analysis or anything else associated with it. I will add that the structure of all those things, though, for the city commission offices is much like it is for other departments. You have employees, who have a salary, and then healthcare benefits and other things, for the most part, available to commissioners are the same as to, city employees. There is a car allowance and a supplement that's, I think, about $4,000 in total that elected officials have that maybe not every employee has. But healthcare, 401k, all those things are similar in structures. Also with office budgets and what they do, they're not budgeted for, we use the term contractual services. So in my office, if I hire a consultant to help us with a financial advisory issue, supplies, copying, travel, training, all those things, so that the way those are set up is the same as they are for other city departments, so that you can find comparable information. And my point there is that it's not a structure where there's a budget afforded to an elected official and they can just spend it on whatever they want to. It's subject to the same budget process as everything else that comes forward. And so the information that you have there, again, didn't provide analysis with it, just tried to provide as much raw data as we could. And again, I think there's a lot of different ways to look at things, but gave you what we think you actually want.
Any questions from Mr. Cook, Ms. Carter?
On page 16 of 17, as I was making notes earlier, Mr. Sims was talking about compensation. Under the mayor's budget, contractual services at $130,000. I'm going to assume that's more to do with city and less to do with the mayor contracting on behalf of his office.
Yeah, I think.
So it just gets lumped in there, but that's not really the mayor's.
Yeah, I think you have in the mayor's office over time, any number of things that might be city functions or city commission functions that are housed there, and pick your spot in history. They may be administered directly by the mayor's office, they may be administered generally, and that's where the budget is. So for instance, at one time, not currently, but at one time, lobbying and governmental relations, that contract was in the mayor's office. So clearly, when someone is representing the city before the legislature on factors that affect the local government, that's a citywide issue, but those expenses at that time would have been in the mayor's office. So I think that is consistent with the way you phrase that there are matters that are in that budget, but they are city functions, not just mayoral.
Would travel and training fall under that also? Now, I understand as the mayor, he probably goes to other gatherings of other city mayors, which is different from the commissioner's position.
Right.
But that one is an outlier to the other commissioners.
Yeah, there's a separate travel and training for each office, and as I mentioned, I think at the last meeting, what you have here is budget, which may or may not be, in my office on a given year, I might have $5,000 budgeted for travel. But if I don't go anywhere, I've got a budget of $5,000, I spent zero. But if I went to three places, I might spend all $5,000.
But if we're looking at
So the mayor's office does have a little bit larger number, it's got more people.
If we're looking at page 13 of 17, obviously the office of the mayor looks way outsized. The other commissioners are within, $20,000 of each other in terms of what their budgets are. But some of that is what we just talked about, and you would have to back that out if you really were looking at apples to apples. Is that a correct statement?
I think you have to do a significant amount of analysis to get those distinctions. Generally speaking, each office has some common functions, and so some expenses are assigned to each, and then you may have in the mayor's office some unique components, again, that are largely city functions, but they're gonna be housed somewhere.
And then the final question I have is looking at Commissioner A compensation. I think I saw that at an $87,000 number. Is that a set number for every aide? So for instance, if the mayor has 3 aides, does he have 3 $85,000 aides?
I think that was one of those where numbers, I would wanna go back and look at them and give you a precise answer, but generally speaking, aides, there's 1 aide per commissioner and an aide for the mayor, and there's 2 additional positions in the mayor's office. all of those folks are in the $80,000 to $90,000 range, and so, it's not identical per person, and that's why I said, it should have been an average in a couple of those places, because it's not,
Okay. But are those
Unique.
considered full-time positions?
those absolutely are considered full-time positions.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, other questions or discussion? Okay.
Not a question, but, just, and this goes back to my comment at the last meeting, so I can kind of share it. At this point, I believe that the current salary is too low. But at this point, I don't think that we have any idea as to, what the increase should be, nor the mechanism or the formula in which to increase it. But I do also want to go back to the fact that based upon our recommendation of the review cycle, if we don't recommend an increase, the current 48,000 will be in place at least until January of 2031, which I think is, from a price, inflation, everything standpoint, is very burdensome. So I think we should discuss whether we think that the current salary should remain the same or not, and then move later to try to determine the mechanism in which, that change, I mean, it could be $1, it could be, but at least we know where people stand in terms of whether or not they think the current salary is adequate.
So could I guess I would motion that we move forward with considering an increase in the salary for the city commissioner.
All right, there's a motion, is there a second? Second. Okay, any discussion on that? Yes, Dr. Kevin.
I would think that we need to, I don't know, my gut tells me, that's real science, that, whatever we're thinking of possibly doing in that direction, that it be tied to some kind of formula so that it doesn't keep on with that. You know, it would have been nice that the state kept up with its salaries, which it hasn't. But I think whatever we do, we don't want this to be a thorn on the side of the actual people coming in.
Any further discussion on the motion? Okay, all in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. I'm opposed. All right.
One comment, just to make sure we're on the same page. Currently, the city commissioner is being paid half of what a county commissioner makes is a static statement. The county commissioner's salaries have increased over time. It's a formula that's based on population. It's not specifically CPI, but I would bet in the last 15 or 20 years, CPI has been 2 or 3% on average, and City of Tallahassee's population and Leon County's population growth has probably been a couple % a year. So I'm just making that point. That doesn't mean you like it or don't like it, but just that it wouldn't be static for 6 years. It would likely increase the population increase.
Okay.
I appreciate your comments, and maybe we have more discussion, but like the prior, function, I think it would be helpful for staff to provide some options based upon us saying that we want to consider an increase, some options. And then as a committee, we parse out up or down what those options, whether we want to go with those options.
Would it be, because there is a formula for the county commission, would a reasonable discussion point be that rather than half the salary, it might be 60% of the salary? Okay, so we could still use, because I think that was, Dr. Kessler's, we need a formula so that we're not changing it back and forth, but it could be that we say 50% of that compensation is too low and we want to move to, recommend moving to something else.
So given that, so we're at 7:30 now, and the request is for some additional information and some proposals at the next meeting, do we want to sort of switch over? We will now have exhausted the four functions, once that function's done. And so we mentioned at the last meeting that maybe talking about other items that the committee wanted to bring up for consideration that aren't part of the charge. And so if the committee's good with that, we can do that now. We talked at the last meeting about sort of a process for this where, if only two people want to, look at this, then we can vote that down and move on. And so I can open the floor now to consideration of this. One of the things that we need to think about, if there's several proposals, is sort of which goes first, because there's a possibility of running out of time, there's staff time and everything, so we might, have some kind of, figure out a way to, to sort of rank these in some fashion, at least what we're gonna consider in an order, if that makes sense. So I'll try and figure out how to do that exactly, but Mr. Willis.
Before we get to that, are we done on the salary piece? 'Cause I have some questions on that.
Yeah, sure, no, let's go ahead, anything you have.
Well, so we've asked staff to come back with recommendations. I think I'm still at the point where I'm not sure that putting a formula in is gonna be the way to go. Because let's say you put a formula in that's tied to CPI, population, median income, the number of trees in Tallahassee. You could figure out any sort of formula. But at the end of the day, there's a dollar amount that's tied to that formula. And so I go back to, I think, if you came to knock on my door and said, your neighbor next door that blows his leaves at 7 o'clock every morning, does he deserve a salary raise? I don't have the information. I have my own personal opinion about this individual, but I don't have the information that I think I need to have in order to make that decision. And I think in some ways, by just throwing a number, and I get what everyone's saying about a formula, but it equates to a number. And so by just throwing a formula in the charter, you're basically, the outcome will be the same as if you knocked on somebody's door and said, does so-and-so deserve a raise? And so I just, as we're talking about staff going and bringing back a recommendation, I guess I'm okay with that, but I'd like there to be maybe some guidelines around that. I maintain I'd love to find an independent option that allowed a group of experts to come in and take in experts that are capable of looking at CPI, median, all of those things in a way that, I'd love to see a group of economists come in and say, hey, this is kind of what the local economy looks like, this is what the output looks like. I feel like there should be something in place, and so that's kind of what I kept coming back to. I know there's questions about what that would look like, but, to the extent that we're just kind of pushing this off on staff, our staff is incredibly qualified, but I also think we've been charged to work through this, and so, I'm concerned that we might miss out on some discussion by just saying, well, let's have staff bring us option A, B, and C and go through that, because I think some of the discussion we've had has been really productive on this issue. I think we all kind of agree that maybe the baseline salary is not where it should be. But I'd like to have a more thoughtful discussion about how we get to the end goal, because I think we all have, we just voted on do we want to have this conversation or not. We all have the same goal in mind. I'm not sure just plugging a formula into the charter gets us there. And so, if y'all are done discussing it, that's fine. I'd like to put that to the committee, because I think there's a way to do it that gets where we want to go.
Very quickly, I think, before we move on, I just want to throw it out there. It's not a motion, but I think, I'm with this forum, we may want to start, think about what that number is. I guess combination of what Jerry said, and what we want to propose. I've been in private sector for about 15 years now, and although this is not a management job, this is not a job, it's a public service. fairly compensating someone, and again, I would never think I would agree with Will Crowley on this, but fairly compensating somebody it's important, and I think it improves our ethics. I think it improves the quality of decisions in general, that if we are able to get more people involved in politics, because quite a lot of people out there don't like where the city is going, and they want to participate, and they want to maybe run for office, but they have a child, maybe they have two, maybe they have three. So they are making a decision of between public service or do I just go get a real job. So I think to get more young folks involved, to get more individuals that want to do this job on behalf of our community involved, we need to look into this. But I want community to consider before the next meeting. It looks like we're gonna move on to other discussions, but not a motion, just throwing a number out there. 75% of the county salary. Maybe too much, maybe less. I have no position on it. Let's see if we could get close to what others are being compensated, at least not tying directly to the county, but 75% of the county salary. Those are commissioners as well. They're doing similar jobs. They're making policies. They are in the same boat as the city commissioners, but they're being compensated more than the city commissioners, who are somewhat participating in all these different committees and meetings and blueprint, CRTPA, CRA. I mean, and those guys are also going to those committee meetings, but they're being compensated $96,000 a year, 98. I think city commissioners should get close to that number. 75%, potentially 60, maybe 80. I would love to hear more information, more opinion on this. I think we are appointed to give our opinion. So I'm just throwing 75% out there for the discussion. Looking forward to having it.
Right.
I think it's going to be very important. I hear what Jared is saying, and you were, but the whole idea, I think, about having staff bring back 3 recommendations would allow us to put framing on what those recommendations are. We have a lot of things that salaries are based on, not just in the city, but everywhere. So I would think that if Jim is going to look at that, there are several components of what this job entails. What are the major things that are required? What does the industry pay for those things that are required? So when we come back with the 75, 85, 2%, whatever it is, you have a framing for making the decision. So I'm just in favor of allowing them to go, do their homework, and bring it back for our consideration.
Ms. James, and then Dr.
Again, I'm in favor of a recommendation, but I do want to reiterate a point that I've made before, to Blues and Kisses, which is, if you look at the chart of cities that have been provided to us, we are an anomaly. Setting a formula in a charter for compensation of a councilman person, we're the only ones that are doing it. And the reason why I think we're struggling as a charter review committee is because this is not the place for that. And so I would just ask that staff in their review look at and lean on the League of Cities and ask for best practices, which we've done that, and it's in here. Again, I get boos and hisses every time. Thank you for the boo and hiss. That I bring it up, but when you elect individuals, they're elected officials. If they decide to vote on an increase of their salary, and you don't want that to happen, you vote them out. You say, I think that the number they came up with was wrong. And so I just want to reiterate that point that 90% of the cities that were listed on the chart do not have a prescriptive formula in the charter of what the compensation should be.
Dr. Sherman.
Yeah, so we do have this one chart which shows where we will be at if we went to 50, 2/3 of the commission salary, 3/4 and 90. so we have that, so I think if we, the other recommendation would be something along with, they're suggesting something that, how would it, if we took it out of the charter, if we could just get different proposals like that from the staff, I think that would be helpful.
Ms. Moore?
That goes along to my question, and I think this is for Amy. Our motion that we voted on was that we believe there was an increase necessary. We clearly have not seen any draft language for that. So if we came back together and did what Sharon suggested, which is remove it from the charter, then our language, if we had a motion that passed, then our language would reflect the new language in the charter referring to an ordinance of how compensation is set. Is that a correct statement?
That's one way to do it.
So we still have that opportunity to do that, even though we have voted tonight to move forward with compensation increase recommendation.
I believe so, unless whatever you bring back for your second motion is a decrease.
Okay. And I mean, that's what you're saying. I think you're saying more of a flexibility and not having to wait 10 years to change the compensation change.
So as the person who voted against the whole thing, let's see if I can frame this, some corridors that we might move forward here. So it sounds like there's probably 3 or 4 or 5 different old channels we could look at. Okay, so one is, keep it the way it is, but some different percentage of the counties, okay? One is, let's take it out of the charter entirely and let the commissions decide by ordinance. Another is maybe some other formula that's based on other, what other communities do. And then, Mr. Wells, if I understand, your proposal is sort of that there be a study that's at the commission level, that's far beyond this group, that would be a recommendation. You guys hire some people to study this, and then you decide and put it on the ballot. Is that what I'm hearing?
I mean, something along those lines. So I know that, I think I made this point before, other state legislatures have independent bodies that go in and set, they're tasked with setting. I don't think it's something that needs to go on the ballot. They're just given the authority under, whether it's the state constitution or statute or ordinance or whatever, they're given the authority to set the salaries on a regular basis or recurring basis. So that's kind of what I had envisioned, but I think there were some concerns about, well, who sets that? I think to Sharon's point, anyone, I mean, you have elected officials that are elected to be there. If the public doesn't like the people that are picked, maybe they should make a decision in the ballot box, but, I think and I apologize, because this isn't something that I've fleshed out. It was something that I hope we could kind of talk through, because I think there's a way to do this that provides a level of independence, but also, it takes it out of this, because I can't agree more. I don't think it goes in the charter. I don't think the formula, and I've said this multiple times, I don't think the formula is a good way to do it. I don't think statute's a good way to set county commission salaries. I'd like to find something that works here, rather than just say, all right, we'll just put it 100% and move on, because I don't think that's gonna, if we truly wanna do something, I don't think that's gonna accomplish it.
Mr. Chair, procedurally, I'm just a little bit concerned about the vote that's already been taken. So, as I understood that vote, it was a motion to recommend to the city commission that there be an increase in salaries reflected in the charter.
I think that was just a motion for purposes of this debate. Do we want further discussion on increasing the charter? Please tell me if you.
Yeah,
so I think that's just a means of deciding we want to talk about this more, and most of us do. So, okay.
As opposed to leaving it the same.
Yes. Okay, so, Mr. General and Ms. Van.
I was just going to reinforce, the thought process you had, Mr. Chair. We may wanna kind of figure out which way we wanna go with it. Because do we wanna keep the formula tied to the county, or are we bringing CPI into the mix? For functional purposes, we may just wanna quickly discuss it. If the committee wants to keep the county formula, I guess you're indirectly following the population formula, which the county follows, then we are tying our city commission salaries to the county. So do we want to keep that route? Should we just take a functional vote and see, because staff, I'm just trying to make their life easier. If we eliminate the county formula, then maybe they can focus on CPI and other methods to bring back. But if, I'm in favor of not making this complicated. I think there's already an existing formula out there. Just we could discuss 60, 70, 80%. But if county formula is not where we want to go with, which I have no preference, we may just want to take a functional vote and then have the staff bring back other formulas or other recommendations.
I don't want to speak for the other committee members, but it might be nice to get, examine, compare them apples to, one, or let's, so I'd suggest again, there's probably 4 or 5. If there's another channel somebody wants to go down, please say so. But I'm seeing them as the way to describe it. Either it's, you keep it as the same percentage of the county or something like that. Take it out of the charter with the set by ordinance by the commission, a different formula of some kind. And then, Mr. Wilson, I'm not picking on you, I'm just trying to understand. So our function is to recommend something with regard to the charter to the city commission. So is your idea to recommend that there be sort of an independent body to set this, that's sort of separate? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, look, if you want language from me, then you could put something in the charter that says the city commission is directed to develop by ordinance an independent process for reviewing salaries based on local economy, median income.
Okay.
You could name 4 or 5 different things and say they're tasked with doing this in ordinance. They're not tasked with putting a salary in ordinance, but they're tasked with saying in ordinance, this is the process that we're going to create that will allow us to have some independent oversight over our salaries that we as a body, the city commission, or as a political body, as the city of Tallahassee, are not required to make a decision.
Okay. All right. Is that? Okay. This way.
And I've just been wanting to say, what I'm recommending is really a hybrid of what Jerry's recommending, meaning that if the languages that we're recommending that the city set salary via budget, and these are the other examples, budget, ordinance, or resolution. My expectation would be just like other recommendations that are on a municipal agenda, there would have been the hiring of a consultant or some full analysis before that number is brought before that body. And so there would be some deliberative analysis that, whomever they will either hire or have, staff go through a very deliberative process to give them frankly cover. So I think it's a hybrid that.
Okay.
I'm similar with Mr. Laws. I think the idea of some sort of compensation review is not a bad idea. Because part of us is like, it's hard to come up with a number when we're not following them around all day, being like, this time you're doing this, and this time you're doing this. It's hard to know how much you should pay them. I think a compensation review would be a good idea, but would like to reiterate that I have every time that probably should have been higher some staff.
Okay. All right, so are we set on that? Yes, that's.
Thank you. So I just wanted to address several things. One, I think it's very difficult to decrease salary. So, and when you have commissions voting to increase their salaries, set in motion something that's very difficult to correct, as you may be saying right now. And I just want to be clear on the state, do they revise their population and salary numbers every 2 years?
Every year.
Every year, they do? Okay, so I was in error on that. And I was looking at a salary increase when I was going to ask you to possibly get some data, and I was looking at 2 or 3%, 5%, maybe those kind of scenarios. I wasn't looking at, numbers that I hear drifting around. you know, we still, however you want to describe it, is a strong city manager, basically, and his team doing the execution and the work, and a weak mayor who's ceremonial to a large extent, different from the other four commissioners. So I was in error that this wasn't being reviewed as often as it is, and the extent of a raise, if I was looking at one, would be in the lower ranges, as be described as minimal.
Okay. All right, anything else on this item? If not, then we're 9 minutes from 8, maybe we'll go a little longer tonight because we've got everybody here. Why don't we take public comment on, so we're now to the top, to the point of, are there additional items that this committee should recommend to the city commission that they should perhaps consider in terms of the charter amendment? So, any member of the public like to speak on that? Yes, sir.
Hey, I'm Chris Moore, the Deputy Supervisor. For a question, the conversation I'm listening to, it sounds like we're headed to put something on the general election ballot this year, some items. It also sounds like they're going to be single topic items. The question is that a requirement in the city charter that that's the form and placement for these? Because I know in some charters there's requirements that go to the general. There's a requirement that you can't log roll, as they call it, and combine items. So I'm just curious, I think this committee's headed that way, so it may not be necessary now. It's more of a question, is there a prescription in the charter that kind of outlines that? Just thinking about a ballot and voter education, stuff like that down the road.
Yeah, do you guys know the answer to that off the top of your head?
I'll start talking, and there are 2 or 3 people who may correct me where I'm wrong. I don't think that's prescribed in our charter, but I think the expectation is and has been, this committee would make recommendations on these items to the city commission, and city commission would consider all of these, whatever the results might be. But that whatever comes forward from the city commission would be presented in single item fashion. There are 4 items here that have been talked about, and if there was a vote to change all 4, then you have 4 single items, and that it would be in the November, the general election. I don't think that's been specifically stated, but any discussions of timetables have always ended with that date, so I'm sure that's the expectation. But again, I don't think it's prescribed anywhere.
I'm not suggesting you take that up as additional, I just want to make sure that I kind of know what I think I'm hearing, where things might end up, that I see in other charts.
All right, yes, Mr. Ralph.
Yeah, at the risk of being run out of here on a rail, I would like to propose one other item. The sale of public assets has been a point of contention in recent years, especially when they're done without competitive bidding processes, or even appraisals for actual value. I would like to see the city of Tallahassee explore what other cities have done, putting in their charter, requiring a unanimous vote of the city commission for the sale of any public assets. Maybe you could have it over a certain value threshold. In particular, I'm concerned about Florida Power and Light coming and trying to buy our utility. It's great having a public utility in the city of Tallahassee. I'm reminded every time I have to interact with them when the storm blows out my power, which it does because of the trees. But it's excellent. We're very lucky to have a public utility, and as many people might know, they're already asking about Tallahassee. They reached out to the city commissioner to ask for districts, which here we are talking about districts. So I would like to see some sort of action on protecting public assets so they just can't be sold to, corrupt individuals.
Okay. Any other member of the public like to speak? Ms. Majestic.
I just want to speak to the point of a ballot initiative that has multiple items for the public to consider, needs to take into consideration that they need to be concise, simple to understand for the public to be able to understand and vote on it. So if there is a formula, it should not be so complicated how you come to the amount or the formula that you're using for a salary increase, that the public can't wrap their mind around what you're talking about. The reason, even in a situation where people were against increasing salaries, that 1/2 of the county salary was able to get passed, it's because it was simple for the public to compare and understand. And I'm not arguing for any particular formula. I'm just saying with several items that you will have on the ballot initiative, it's going to be important because the public will be the final arbiter of this, not the city commission, but the public. And it should be simple enough for them to be able to understand what they're voting on.
Thank you. Let's see, yes, ma'am.
Okay, yes, Sunday Deacon. So we're talking about, I guess, the effectiveness of our city commission, and Mr. Crowley made a great point about that is a great way to hold our commission accountable with what they can do with our public lands, with our public money. But another thing I want to emphasize is the police chief, considering that, you know, we have a big problem with, again, police accountability, and folks in the community ask for more police accountability. But then when we go to the city commission, it's like, oh, it's up to Reese Gold, who sort of just sits there. I suggest maybe we look into moving the police chief from under the management of Reese to the city commission. So when people come to the city commission and tell them about what they see in the community with their police, that the commission has the authority to do something about it, and not just have to wait and hope Reese does something.
Anybody else? Anybody online want to speak on this? Okay. Any member of the committee want to discuss this point?
Thank you. I have a couple of items I'd like to recommend for charter amendment. If you give me some leeway here, these are brand new items that we haven't discussed yet, so I want to try to lay it out for you so you can decide. I've already discussed with Mr. Cook 2 documents that I want to have presented to the committee so that we can have an informed discussion next week about them. But before I tell you what those are, I'd like to just give it some context by pointing out section 61 of the current charter, which delineates the duties and responsibilities of the Independent Ethics Board. Number 6 of those, it's on page, I think it's page 10 of the city charter. Number 6 says, the duties include recommend proposed ordinances, resolutions, or charter amendments to the city commission in all areas of ethics and corruption. It goes on to say that such legislative proposals shall be filed with and considered by the city commission. Since the ethics board has been in existence for about 9 years now, they have made multiple recommendations for ordinances, and the city commission has done their part and considered each one of them. They have approved and written ordinances for most of the recommendations, and denied some others, which is their right. In 2019, there was a package of ordinances that were recommended that strengthened the ethics code for the city considerably, and the city commission voted all of them in unanimously. Commissioner Bryant was one of those unanimous votes. In 2022, another package of ordinances was recommended to the city, and some of them were accepted and some of them were denied. Two of those that were denied not because of the substance of the recommendation, but because they would have changed or expanded the role and duties of the ethics board, or they would have expanded the jurisdiction of the ethics board. So it was the opinion of legal counsel that those could not be modified by ordinance, but would have to go to a charter amendment, and would have to be considered on a ballot by the public. Every time that was stated, Mayor Daley made the point that he could not support any charter amendment in the absence of a full charter review, which is why we're sitting here today. Unfortunately, we're not having a full charter review, but we are considering amendments. So those two recommendations that were denied because they would have required charter amendments are, first, a recommendation by the ethics board sent by letter using the procedures laid out in the charter that they should be filed with the city commission. On October 17th, 2023, the city commission received a letter from the ethics board recommending the authority to receive and investigate whistleblower complaints be allowed to the ethics board in those specific areas where the inspector general does not have authority to do so. As a background, 2020 ordinance, the inspector general was given the authority to handle whistleblower complaints. But the inspector general himself has pointed out that there's a gap in that coverage because he doesn't have the requisite independence from the city commission that would be required to properly handle a whistleblower complaint. So the ethics board recommends that the inspector general retain that power for most of city positions, since he is organizationally independent of the city manager, under which most of the city jobs exist. He can handle those whistleblower complaints, and he reports to the city commission. His job depends on them, so he's not properly independent of those of the city commission. He also, of course, is not independent of his own office, so he can't handle whistleblower complaints that might be directed toward the office of inspector general. The ethics board has the procedures in place to conduct investigations, issue remedies for ethics violations. They have that all in place. The mayor has directed the ethics officer and the inspector general to work out procedures where they could handle, they could both handle such whistleblower complaints without stepping on each other's toes, without cross jurisdiction. So that all is in place. The ethics board, of course, is independent of the city commission. They do not report to the city commission. So this letter, which is considerable in size, so I've asked the treasurer clerk to provide each of us with a copy of it. There's it's a rather complex issue, but at the end of the discussion, the actual amendment to the charter would be just a few tweaks of words. It would be, as Ms. Johnson said, can't be complex for the voters. It can be spelled out simply. That's one of the issues that I want you to have introduced. The second issue was recommended to the city commission in January of 2022 to make clear that the the Independent Ethics Board's jurisdiction over the city commissioners, which currently exists, explicitly be stated to include any potential actions they may have as members of independent governmental bodies, such as CRA, Blueprint Intergovernmental Agency. The other document that I've asked Mr. Cook to provide to everybody is the agenda items for when the City Commission discussed this issue back in 2022. Again, the advice of council said that this could not be done by ordinance. It would have to be a charter amendment. So each of these letters, these documents that I've asked to be produced, actually provides both sides of it, where the city attorney, former city attorney, expressed one opinion, the ethics board and its attorney expressed somewhat different opinion, but the documents will include both of those opinions. So it's a lot to read. That's why I wanted to have full legal reports for you all to understand, to digest it. It's worth pointing out that the ethics board's position is that they currently have jurisdiction over city commissioners when they sit as board members of the CRA and Blueprint. Mayor Daley is also on record as saying he supports the position of the ethics board in opposition to his city attorney at the time. And Commissioner Matlow has also expressed agreement with the ethics board's position. So in my mind, if you can find an issue where Mayor Daley and Commissioner Matlow agree on something, it's not worth considering. Those are the two items I want to present. I've got plenty more background to give to you at the time, because I was involved in drafting both of these recommendations. Of course, I'll wait until you have a chance to read all this stuff, and we'll discuss it next week. If I could ask the treasurer clerk to put it on the agenda for next week along with those items, so that everybody, the public included, can see those documents.
Okay, so, you know, procedurally and, you know, how we're doing this, you know, because this is a little bit, you know, this wasn't part of the charge. It hasn't, you know, the public knows nothing about this unless, you know, absent what other people have done. So there's nothing out there to get people's input and that sort of thing. So we're sort of in uncharted waters here a little bit. And I think it would be appropriate, you know, to maybe get some sense of the board. Are Mr. Payne's, you know, proposed amendment something that you want to consider and have, you know, maybe put out on the website that the suggestion has been made, we're going to look at it, and have staff do whatever would like to be done. So why don't we maybe discuss that at this point? Mr. Demler.
Procedurally, so eventually we'll vote on what to discuss, correct?
Yes.
That was the conversation we had last time. So do we want to move on to the other topics before we discuss that and get everything on the table? Yeah. Do we have any others that want to?
I think that's probably a good idea. Let's see if other members of the committee have other things they want to bring up, and then we can sort of discuss it together. Not sure.
Yeah, I would echo one that came from the public speaker, community comment, on the police chief being under the purview of the commission as opposed to the city manager. Just some of the history we've had with decisions made at the city manager level concerning the chief of police and things that come out of TPD, that may be a good idea that we can move forward with. So I'd like to see how the board feels about that one and moving that forward as a recommendation.
Okay. Are there any more, Ms. Cole?
Mr. Motion, earlier in these discussions, we talked about districts, and I was the one who brought that up, but that was only if we were increasing the size of the commission.
Right.
And since we have opted to recommend not increasing the size, I don't have any desire to discuss any member districts.
Okay. All right. Any other topics from anybody else? Okay.
I respectfully disagree. I think it's worth discussing. I go back to representation. I think it's worth discussing whether the representation we have is working. Again, I go back to, we've seen the maps. I think the way that the current commission looks is probably fine. But that's not what we're tasked to look at. It's essentially, what are the guardrails that we've set, and is it working for the populace? And so I'd like to talk about districts, and, I think that in our discussion around the number of electors, I don't think there's anything about our conversation around districts that could not inform our final decision on that. And so I go back to Ms. James, you mentioned possibly being open to some combination of districts and at large, which I think we would all agree has worked well at the county, it's worked well at the school board. And so I'd like to have the conversation about districts outside of the discussion around the number. And so if we decide that districts make sense, and districts in combination with some format of at-large, then maybe that can inform, okay, do we want to talk about the number? Does it make sense? But I think that those two things can exist separately. And then there's nothing to say, okay, well, we think that, let's say that the group as a whole, the committee says, well, maybe districts and at-large make some sense, but maybe 5's not the right number, maybe it is, maybe 7's the right number, maybe 9. So, like I said, I'd like to keep those two things separate, and then maybe have the discussion, and then if we decided something that we want to move forward with.
It lost. And just for clarification, that's why I voted no on the number, because I wanted to have another discussion before we settle on the number, but just as an outline.
Okay. All right, so we have the, Mr. McKay's ethics proposal, the proposal about the police chief, and this, anything else?
Could you clarify the district to stand in that some for that record?
Well, then our vote we took earlier was not to increase the number of commissioners. So
I just heard it was rearing its head again.
Well, and I took this to be that within that, within the 5 commissioners, this is a proposal to perhaps look at districts or some combination of, at-large and districts. Is that correct?
Yeah, so as I understand, I don't want to put words in Tom's mouth. You were saying that your previous discussion about districts had been in the context of potentially having more. I was simply saying that my desire to talk about districts is separate from that. And so I was proposing that we talk about that separately from the number of electors.
And just to clarify what I stated that when there was a clean slate, and I'm of the position that we take a solid vote. So I don't see where there's a mechanism to reopen discussion about hybrid or any other, at this point.
All right, so we got those 3, it looks like that's the universe here, so do you want to maybe talk about, sorry.
There was a, public comment on the sale of public assets, which was before.
Are you saying, yeah. If any members want to bring that up, if not, then we'll just deal with what the committee's brought up. Okay, so I guess let's maybe just have discussion on each of these relatively briefly, and let's start with the ethics items. Any discussion on that? Mr. Benoit?
I just have a question. I was following you, Mr. Payne, but then I lost you towards the end. You said that the ordinance, the independent ethics board covers the commission. So, and then you mentioned the gap. So clearly there's something not functioning, you think.
It's specific,
Yeah.
specific to the whistleblower authority. Currently, the city commission, although it has jurisdiction over the ethics board has jurisdiction over the city commission with regards to the ethics code. It does not have that jurisdiction with regard to whistleblower protection. Only the inspector general has that whistleblower authority right now, and he is not independent of the city commission.
So, but you said it covers the commission, so it's not, I see, so your discussion you would like to discuss bringing city commission under the independent ethics board in terms of the whistleblower complaint.
Specifically, currently they are under the ethics board with everything except, well, only with regard to the ethics code as it exists.
Sure.
Does not cover whistleblower protection.
How about the blueprint portion of it?
That's an entirely different issue, an entirely different amendment. But it's with regard to the jurisdiction of the ethics board over the city commissioners when they sit. It's because they are city commissioners. They are board members of the CRA. They don't have any choice. They're not elected to the board of the CRA. It's because they're city commissioners. Similarly with the Blueprint Intergovernmental Agency, which includes the county commission, that nothing we do would affect the county commission. But when the city commissioners sit as members of the Blueprint Intergovernmental Agency, it is the position of the ethics board that they are still covered as city commissioners by the ethics code. And so that if somebody were to raise a complaint that says they saw a violation of the ethics code by a city commission as he was sitting as part of the Blueprint IA, the ethics board would be authorized to investigate that complaint and either refer it to further enforcement as necessary or not. But that's the idea behind it.
So can you, this is my ignorance, I mean, I think I understand the second one well enough. For the first one, give me an example. So what whistleblower are we talking about? I mean, so if there's a mid-level staff person that's a whistleblower, aren't they currently covered under the existing things? Give me an example of what's not
The
covered.
whistleblower statute in state law covers very specific violations of law. Things like misappropriation of funds, gross mismanagement, malfeasance, misfeasance. Most of those things are not part of the ethics code. But there is one violation listed in the ethics code, which is misuse of public position. That's what the state calls misfeasance, as far as my understanding of it. So that when those two overlap, if somebody were to have witnessed a violation of misuse of public position, but they are fearful for their job, then quite often they will not report it. The ethics board currently has a position that they will accept anonymous complaints. The problem with anonymous complaints is they're very difficult to investigate because the person who knows most about it does not want to reveal their identity. There's also current pending legislation which will make it illegal to submit a complaint to a local municipal ethics board without filing a sworn complaint. It would eliminate anonymous complaints. That has passed the Senate, and I believe it's up for the House tomorrow, as a matter of fact. If they cannot provide anonymous complaints, that makes the whistleblower protection all the more important, so that they can swear a complaint, but their identity is protected. The whistleblower statute allows for an exemption of the Sunshine Law to protect people making such complaints.
Well, the labor this, but I'm still not getting a clear example of what's, you know,
Okay,
so I see a commissioner, you know, kick an old lady or something, and, you know, is that abusive position? You know, tell me what we're talking about here.
Let's say, if you don't mind, Mr. Cook.
Go for it.
Mr. Cook is one of the four appointed officials that reports to the city commission. His job depends on that. If some future date, in going over his books, he's the one that anytime expenses for the city come through, it goes through his hands. against doing his due diligence, say he comes across some misfeasance in action of the city commission, or if he sees that, and we've already seen, all of us are aware of the federal conviction that happened a few years ago by a former member of the city commission. If he sees that, and a majority of the city commission doesn't like the fact that he's reporting it, they could fire him without cause.
I don't like your example.
That's why I asked.
Mr. Chair, at some point, I know, so last week I think I said I wasn't comfortable having this conversation without everyone being here. But I'm actually, now I'm thinking, and this isn't, I don't know who's gonna be here or not any given week, so, but I feel like this isn't really fair to Mr. Payne. So I'd like to understand what you're saying. I don't have what you have in front of you. So I'd like to make a procedural suggestion. That maybe if for those of us that have, because I know Dr. Starwell has some proposals as well. For those of us that have proposals to the board, perhaps what makes the most sense is we table this until next week. And for those of us that have proposals, we submit to staff the things that we think make the case for the proposal. And then we have the opportunity while everyone has all the same materials. Because I'm assuming that whatever you have in front of you will give me some context on what you're trying to do versus speaking in hypotheticals, because, it's getting late, I'm hungry, and I'm having a hard time keeping track. I know that the public's been really patient too, but I want to hear this, so that's my suggestion. I think that might be the best way to move forward, it might be the most efficient way to move forward, so.
Yeah, I don't have any objection to that, but my concern about this, and this highlights it a little bit, is, it's difficult, concerned about us making a snap judgment about things that are, could be way off in the weeds, and we don't know the ramifications. It's very hard sitting here in what'll basically gonna be 2 more meetings, unless we extend it, to try and get to the bottom of this, again, the second of those seems like sort of a no-brainer to me. I don't really see that to be an issue, but this one, I don't really understand. And then the police chief is a huge, major political deal, but I'm not gonna be there on that, I can tell you. Just because I don't think there's adequate time to really flesh it out. And the districts, maybe that's so anyway, having said that, I don't think the proposal's a bad idea. Let's get some more data, and people can kind of say, hey, do we want to spend time with this or not?
That was my sense, actually.
Yeah, Ms. James.
And so I'm more in line with the chair. I think that this illustrates the complexity of the need for us to deliberate. And when I started here, I said I didn't have any preconceived notion about any of the functions. And it's taken 6 weeks worth of public testimony, 6 weeks worth of information requests for me to get to that point. And so I'm very uncomfortable with leaving 2 weeks to make any type of informed consideration, either to consider or not to consider, let alone what the recommendation should be. So I personally prefer that we stick within the scope of the review that came from the city commission. And maybe if this is appropriate, say to them that there was a need or a desire to discuss these 3 additional things in which we did not have time to deliberate. So that they're on notice that these 3 things are important to the public and the community. But I'm not comfortable with 2 weeks left to hear, deliberate, and decide on anything of this magnitude.
Okay.
Well, I think we're having the conversation in the context of, I think we all know the timeline that we're under, and so I think that should be part of it. I'm just not convinced another 30 or 45 minutes this evening is gonna.
I don't think you would disagree on that.
So that's my point. It just doesn't, we don't have to belabor this at the next meeting, so maybe we just take this. Again, I wanna give this my due consideration. I don't think we're at a point in the evening where it's fair to any of the proposals to do that. And so that's kind of what I would like to see happen. and again, look, we're under the same, we know the timeline, it's very clear to all of us, I think it's been something that we've been working as a committee under a very kind of, we know the timeline, we know it's coming, we know what we need to get done. But if we're gonna have a good faith conversation about, does Mr. Payne's proposal make sense, does Mr. Strobel's proposal make sense, does my proposal make sense, I think that we need to have a discussion that isn't the tail end of the meeting that's gone over, and I think it'd be helpful to see the materials.
Okay, so if there's no objection, we'll do that. But at the next meeting, I would suggest that we start with function, whatever it is, we still have number 2. Let's look at what we do that, and then let's get back to
Amenable, okay?
all right. We're gonna save any further public comment until next time, so thank you, everybody, for continuing.
Thank you.
Oh.